Welcome to the Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast on YouTube. I hope this episode helps you identify and break your next growth barrier. And if you enjoy it, subscribe to my YouTube channel and you'll never miss a thing. Hey, whether it's staffing, budget, volunteers, or one of the many things that hold back churches, overcoming growth barriers is the key to progress. And if you're ready to break your next barrier, the Art of Leadership Academy is for you. Inside, you'll get access to all my on-demand church leadership courses, team trainings, coaching calls, but more importantly, you'll join a network of 1,500 high-capacity church leaders. Some will be right where you're at and some a little bit ahead, but everybody in the group is committed to leading a healthier, growing church and supporting each other. So if you want to fuel your mission, not just by consuming information, but by pairing it with people who will both challenge and support you, today's the day. You can learn more and start making progress by visiting theartofleadershipacademy.com. And also, check out He Gets Us. Churches across the country are using resources from the He Gets Us campaign to give people new and creative ways to share Jesus' message of radical love. Go to hegetsuspartners.com/Carey and you can sign up to get free resources like discussion guides, prayer guides, reading plans, and more. Now to today's episode. John, welcome to the podcast.
Carey, fired up to be here. Thanks for having me.
You are. Well, first of all, I said this privately. I want to say it publicly. Thank you so much for what you do. You were one of those handful of voices that I was listening to a decade plus ago before I got into podcasting, watched you launch Entrepreneur on Fire, joined Podcasters Paradise. I remember those days well, all these people launching shows back in 2013, 2014. And here we are all these years later. So just thank you for doing that.
I received that. It's been quite a journey. I definitely love helping other people get their voices and their messages out to the world. So it's definitely an honor, and I appreciate your support over the years.
Yeah, it's been incredible and true gratitude. I'll tell you, I never would have guessed 27 million downloads and counting, but Hey, here you go. I was hoping for 1 million one day, maybe before I died. It would be like, well, maybe 1 million, and it just keeps going and going and going, which is incredible. So how did you end up? Give us the backstory. I know you've got a military background, et cetera, et cetera. You did a number of different things, but yes, sir. Entrepreneur on Fire for the last decade. But how did you get there? How did you end up doing what you do now?
I'm a boy from Maine, very small town. So I grew up kind of in that nice little homegrown environment, walking or biking down to the local park every day. Everybody knows your name, so to speak. And I went to college, still in New England, at a small school called Providence College in Rhode Island. Yeah. And I went on an Army ROTC scholarship. So post-college, I spent 8 years as an officer in the U.S. Army, did 4 active, 4 in the reserves. And mixed in there was a 13-month tour of duty in Iraq as a tank commander. So I was in charge of 16 men and 4 tanks. So that definitely shapes a lot of what I've done over the subsequent years. And when I got out of the Army, I kind of felt like I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew that I wanted to do something big. So I really swung for the fences. I went to law school. I was in corporate finance. I was in commercial real estate, but none of those avenues really panned out for me. And so at 32 years old, I just started consuming as much content as I could to learn from people who had had massive success in the past. So I was reading all the business books. I was listening to all the audio books on the same topics. And I kind of stumbled into this world of podcasting, which I hadn't really heard of, to be honest. And it was a very new kind of crazy but fun world. And one thing that I really immediately fell in love with about it was free, it was on demand, and it was targeted content. Because those audiobooks at $24, $25 a pop, they were kind of adding up for somebody on a fixed budget. Yeah. So I loved the podcast world and all that kind of came around that. And eventually it just became very obvious to me that there was a void in the podcasting space, that there was nobody doing a daily show interviewing the world's most successful entrepreneurs. And I happened to want to listen to a daily show interviewing the world's most successful entrepreneurs. So I knew there was at least an audience of one. And I decided to be the person to launch that podcast. That podcast was Entrepreneurs on Fire back in 2012. And as you and I are talking here today, I've interviewed over 3,700 successful entrepreneurs, over 2 million monthly listens right now, over 140 million total listens to date. And the numbers just keep going up, just like yourself. I'm just like, wow, this is crazy.
Yeah, that's incredible. So, we have a lot of ex-lawyers on the show, myself included. How did your background, both in the military and, training in law, how did that prepare you for what you have ended up doing with the last decade of your life?
So I'll start with the military, because in the military, number one, you learn what it means to be disciplined, because it can be a matter of life and death. If you cut corners, if you aren't disciplined, if you don't train the right way, you literally could be putting yourself, and then of course your soldiers, if you're an officer, in a position of injury or fatal harm. Yeah. So I realized how important discipline was. And that was kind of one of the big eye-openers for me when I joined the entrepreneurial world, is there just seemed to be this unbelievable lack of discipline. So I went from this world of like everybody around me, all my fellow officers, were by necessity, we were so disciplined. I just thought that was the world. But then I realized that wasn't. That was kind of a little bubble of the world called the U.S. Army in a time of war. And I definitely used that discipline to my advantage starting off. And that allowed me to really create a culture, a team, and a business that was able to support a daily podcast interviewing the world's most successful entrepreneurs. Because there were people, when I first was kind of pitching that idea around, the industry, saying there's no way anybody could do a daily podcast, interviewing an entrepreneur every single day, launching that business, keeping that business going. It's impossible. And I knew they were wrong for one. I knew it was very possible, but I kind of even laugh now at how wrong they are, because as you and I are talking right now, I run a daily podcast 4 hours a week. In 4 hours, I'm running a daily podcast. That's 7 days a week. That's 365 days a year. Now, it took me a lot of hard work, time, energy, and effort to build the team to get to those 4 hours per week. But, not only is it possible to do a daily podcast, it's possible to do a daily podcast working 4 hours, 4 days per month.
Okay, we got to break that down, because that was part of the discipline. I remember I have a friend, Rich Birch, and we were watching you. I think he first sent me Entrepreneur on Fire, probably shortly after you launched. And he was getting into the Unseminary podcast, and he's like, look, this guy's doing it like once a day. And I was like, that's insane, man. I'm trying to figure out like once a month or every other month or whatever. And I launched mine bi-weekly, 2 a month, and we're up to 6 a month. So you're obviously not doing, Joe Rogan style 3.5 hour interviews. You've had a very tight format. And by the way, I laughed when you said, I got in the entrepreneurial world and people weren't very disciplined. You got to come hang out in church world. Okay, we can have a conversation about discipline or the lack of it. I think sometimes we allow our spirituality to mask a lot of other things that perhaps we should be paying more attention to. But break down maybe the math of how that works, because I know a lot of people are probably going, really? So how exactly does that work? 30 to 28 to 31 shows a month and 4 hours a week. Explain that.
Yeah. So every Thursday, I'm doing either 7 or 8 interviews. And those interviews are in 40-minute blocks, and they're back to back. So I essentially start at about 1 p.m. on a Thursday. And by 5 to 6 p.m., depending on how many interviews I have that day, whether it's 7 or 8 interviews, I'm done. I'm done for the day. And then when I'm done, my team takes it from there. I upload it to a Dropbox folder, those MP3 files, and my team does everything else. They do the editing, the splicing in of sponsorships, the show notes pages, the uploading to the media host, the social media. So there's a ton of work that does go around running a daily podcast and doing all those things that I was talking about, having a website with a show notes page, having emails that go out 3 times per week, having social media that's running around it. those are all optional, but I do want to maximize what I'm doing. So that's all part of my team's plan. But so even with me really maxing out in a lot of ways, every single aspect of podcasting and the promotion that goes around behind it, I'm still able to run that podcast in about 4 to 5 hours a week. That's one day. And again, I don't even start till 1 p.m. So I mean, like, I get up in the morning. I'm an early riser. Like I'm getting up in the morning, usually when the sun's rising. I take my dog on a 3-mile walk. I come back, I make a smoothie. I'm sipping some coffee. I have weight training 3 days a week. I'm very active in pickleball and other sports I like to play to stay active. Kate and I are traveling all the time. So I'm taking a 3-week trip to Japan in February and a 23-day river cruise in May throughout the entire continent of Europe, essentially. And it's just allows me to really have this daily podcast focus with a team so that when I do take those trips, maybe, like next month I'll be working 6 days a month because I'm in preparation of that trip. But then that month that I'm gone, I'm working 0 days that month. And I've actually taken 2 75-day and 1 90-day trip before where I've just gone to Europe and have, pre-batched all of those episodes in advance. So I essentially, when I left, I wasn't even on a microphone for over 3 months, which was interesting. And to be honest, I missed it. When I got back, I was excited to get back on the mic, but having the type of business that allowed me to do that was really cool to see.
Yeah, that was my question. You must have to work ahead, right? Because we do that on this show. I take July off. I'm usually 6 to 8 weeks off a year, which is just about right for me right now. But my team and I will work ahead. I normally do 2 interviews a week. If you work out the rhythm, if we're doing 6 a month, that's shipping, we're 8 a month. So I work usually 3 months in advance, but we're going to be like ramping up to take July off or times when I'm traveling. So you batch that. But if you would, I'd like to drill down a little bit on your workflow, because I think productivity is something a lot of people struggle with. So just note to leaders. You were talking about this 11 years ago when you started Entrepreneur on Fire. Like this is not new. This is like, I'm batching this stuff. I'm doing it. Was it Friday back then that you were doing it, or was some day
I've
that you were doing it?
definitely changed the days around. For a while it was Friday, then I changed it to a Monday, and then I kept it there for a while, but then Mondays weren't working because if I went for a long weekend, like sometimes I'd still kind of be a little tired, come Monday. Yeah. So I wanted to have like a buffer to get into the week a little bit. So then it was Tuesday for a while. And then I eventually just years ago settled on Thursday. I just like the fact that it's later in the week. And, and now that I'm not starting until 1 p.m., I'm still able to like really, have a very open, productive and enjoyable morning / early afternoon before the day even starts.
So yeah, and there's so many things I think we could drill down on. One of them is, I find this too, I normally record interviews on a Wednesday, and here we are on a Tuesday. We're doing it a day early because we're working ahead. But it's amazing to me how many top leaders happen to be available on a Wednesday at 1 or 3 if you give them enough notice. Because one of the objections to batching things is, well, this person's available Monday, this person's only available Saturday, so therefore I'm working 7 days a week. How does that show up in your workflow? Do you find that 95% of people happen to be available Thursday afternoons?
Yeah, if not higher percentage than that. And the reason for that is we have a very detailed application process. So we get over 400 inbound applications per month for people that want to be on the show. There's a very detailed application process of that. And then the people that are selected are actually paying a $3,500 appearance fee to be a guest on the show. So when you're investing that kind of dollar amount to be on the show the size of ours, you just make it happen. You make whatever time frame we have available. And so I just essentially send them my scheduling link, which is giving them a lot of options, but the options are Thursdays, from the hours of 1 to 5 p.m. essentially. And we almost never have any kind of pushback. People are just booking the dates and it's in their calendar and they're showing up ready to go.
Talk to me about the appearance fee. That's really interesting. Was that something you had at the very beginning? Is it something you added? And what is the rationale behind an appearance fee on a podcast?
So for the first 6 years, we had no appearance fee. It was all me basically, especially the first year or two, going outbound and trying to get people on the show and working really hard to find guests to fill up, that high of an inventory of, 30-ish episodes every single month and 30 interviews and 30 entrepreneurs month over month. So that was a lot of work to get to that point. But then slowly, as year 2 became year 3 and the podcast started getting into the high 6 figures, low 7 figures of listens on a month-to-month basis, and people knew that it was such a huge audience, the amount of inbound requests started increasing and it really has not stopped increasing, since that time frame. So again, now our number is well over 400 applications on a month-to-month basis for, less than 30 spots to be on the show. And so with that kind of supply and demand, about 4 years ago, I said, you know what? I'm going to start just kind of seeing if these are entrepreneurs who really are on fire. Because if you're really successful and if you're asking to come on a show with a big audience, you realize the benefit of having that type of exposure. And that type of exposure is valuable. And it's not free to run my podcast. I obviously have a team I have, equipment fees and I have hosting fees and I have living expenses and all this jazz. So I'm like, let's throw a number out there. So I think I started like $1,500 per month and was per episode, per appearance. And I was pretty shocked at how little pushback I got from that. And because I didn't really know what the response would be. But, I think a lot of these individuals were just like, hey, I spend a lot of money on advertising that I don't even know that works. And now I'm going to be dropping, $1,500 on a podcast that gets over 2 million listens per month. And I'm going to be on for 20 or 30 minutes, like getting to share my voice, my message, my book, my project with the world. Like that seems like a pretty fair exchange to me. And then I just kind of massaged that number as it made sense. And, eventually it actually got up to like, between $4,000 and $5,000 for a while. But then it was pretty obvious to me that dollar amount was not getting, the required. I was really looking for like between 20 to 25 appearance fees per month. So like everything in life, whatever business or product or service you're selling, there is a right price point. It's hard to find that if you don't have a high quantity, but I was kind of able to find that, $3,500 just seemed to be the right dollar amount where it was enough where, just the first 30 people weren't just jumping on it. Cause some people are like, John, that's just not really in our budget. And I'm like, totally understands, for an entrepreneur on fire, that would be in their budget. So when it is, that you'll be a better fit for the show. So please come back and apply then. But until then, this is a non-negotiable appearance fee. And, now that's one of our, very legitimate revenue streams on a month-over-month basis.
Oh, that's really fascinating. It is a conversation. I've had people offer to pay to be on the podcast. I've never taken it because it sort of follows my curiosity trail. I've never paid to be on a podcast, but that's a really intriguing business model. Is there ever somebody who wants to pay and you're like, oh no, we're not doing this interview?
Oh yeah. We get the first bullet point on the application is, I understand if I'm accepted to be a guest on Entrepreneurs on Fire, there's a $3,500 appearance fee. If this is of no interest to you, please do not apply. And so every application we get, that's been the first thing that's been checked off. So essentially everybody who's applying to be on the show knows that is part of the process of being a guest on the show. And so of those, there's definitely individuals for a lot of reasons. The topic might not be something that I want. I really stay away from anything political and there's other topics that, we would probably steer away from if it came up. And then I actually do a 5-minute chat with every single person before we extend to them the invitation. And sometimes people just have the wrong energy, the wrong vibe. And for whatever reason, I just know that it's not going to be a great 20 to 30 minute chat because it's very important, especially for a audio only interview. The energy is going to be there. The vibe's going to be there. I'm going to bring the energy. I'm going to bring the vibe. If the other person's not, it's very mismatched and it leads to a really poor conversation. So I have 5-minute conversations with everybody before we extend them an offer, an opportunity to be on the show to make sure they're the right fit. And some people aren't. So they just don't get the offer.
Oh, that's good to know, because that's totally different than, hey, I put my for sale sign out and whoever wants to pay the money gets on. Yeah, I find that we get pitched. My team tells me about 100 times a week now for people to be on the show. And so very similar, 400 inbound a month. And I mean, we obviously have 6 slots. So it's usually by the time it gets to me, I'm still really picky because, when it was clear, when we had a mutual friend who's like, oh, I can introduce you to John Lee Dumas. I'm like, yeah, 100%. I'm all over that because I knew where I wanted to go with you. So that's really cool that's how you do it.
If I were you, I probably would have like my team, if this was something that you were looking into, I'd have my team, have like a formed reply back. And I actually have a post, eofire.com/guest. That's where we send everybody who's interested. So it's a page on my website, and there's a video of me explaining the process. And then there's an application link on that. And, for $6 a month, and, you probably would only be wanting at most 2 or 3 of those to be appearance fees. I think you're looking at like easily a $10,000 number for people to be a guest on your show. And there'd be, as many requirements as you'd want as far as like, this is not a pitch fest. This is a conversation between you and me, adding value to the audience. And I always do say at the very end, I am going to give you an opportunity to share a call to action, but it's one call to action at the very end. And the entire conversation up to that point is strictly focused on adding value and being a person of value to the listeners of Entrepreneurs on Fire.
Oh, that's really good advice. Yeah. I don't know about appearance fees. I'd really have to give that some thought. Think about it. I can tell you, we have gone to a forum.
It'd be one of those things where you say, hey, to be a guest on the show as an inbound request, it's $10,000. And then the requirement is you're going to essentially tell me what is your suggested, title of the show? What are your suggested, bullet point conversations? If those are of interest, then you and I are going to jump on a call and we're going to, have a full conversation about, is this going to be the best show and the right fit for my audience? And only then will I potentially extend the final invite to you.
Yeah. I think it's really important for a podcaster to have final say about who they have on their show. John Acuff gave me great advice years ago. He just said, it's your show, do what you want. I'm like, yeah, I think you got that from Brian Koppelman, another previous guest. I'm like, that is surprisingly helpful. How do you do show prep? Because do you have an intake form? Because to prep for 8 or 9 interviews in a row, I know you use a standard set of questions as well, but can you explain how that works?
I think there are a lot of great ways to do show prep. I think there's a lot of fantastic podcast hosts out there that have a lot of great and varied ways that they actually prepare for interviews.
Yeah.
For me, I take the approach of, listen, I'm doing a daily show. That's why I don't do video. Just too much added bandwidth and energy. That's why I don't do long form, for the exact same reason. If I'm going to get to 10 years and 3,700 episodes, there's a certain show and a certain strategy that I need to follow to avoid burnout, to avoid me just no longer enjoying it. And that is for me just saying, you know what? I'm going to see what the title and the bullet points are of the show. I'm going to have a 30-word bio of exactly who the guest is that I'm coming on. And in the minutes leading up to the actual conversation, I'm going to scan the title, the bullet points, the 30-minute bio, and of course, I've worked the week prior with my team on the title and the bullet points. So those have all been approved. The 30-word bio kind of gives me a quick little update reminder of what's going on in this person's world and what they do. And then I jump on the call. And one thing that I kind of look at it as, man, I now know not a ton about this person. And I am coming at this interview from a place of curiosity, where I am curious and I let my curiosity go, because I do believe that there is, something that a lot of hosts struggle with, and that's the curse of knowledge, because they know a lot about a topic or about the person or about X, Y, or Z. They have this subconscious assumption that the listeners do as well. And so that curse of knowledge can really hurt. Where for me, I have no, illusions of grandeur that I know anything. And I just go into the interview, with a very base of knowledge, ask the questions that I ask, and knowing that my listeners who are coming into the interview at a very similar place that I'm coming into the interview are hopefully getting the same questions answered that I have and I'm asking them, because they have that same kind of curiosity as well. So that's where my kind of attitude is it's coming from a lot of different angles. Number one is like, how can I do, prep, but little prep, so I'm not overwhelming myself on a daily basis of my interviews that are going forward, but at the same time, still be coming at each interview from a place of curiosity, so that I'm asking the questions that's hopefully my audience has, so that it can kind of be this interview, essentially, that like they're able to get the content from my guest through my voice.
I think that's really important. I mean, unless you're in a total tech niche or something like that where you can talk shop, it's really important. I think the role of the host is to keep the listener in mind. And I pull from all kinds of fields, everything from university professors to podcasters to entrepreneurs to best-selling authors to the whole deal. And yeah, I probably have read the book or at least skimmed it or whatever, but you want to remember, as Seth Godin says, if you sell 1 million copies of your book, 99.999% of the people in the world still have no idea who you are. And that is really, really true. Let's talk more about your workflow. In a typical week where you're at home and not traveling, is it 30 hours, 40 hours, 20 hours? What does that look like? And just give people, because you have I've read your income reports and everything getting ready for today. You have a huge variety of things that you offer through Entrepreneurs on Fire to Fire Nation.
Yeah. So we've already talked about, the 4 to 5 hours, 4 to 5 hours every Thursday for the actual interview day. And then I would just really add essentially 90 minutes a day on top of that, because that's kind of what my morning work routine looks like. So after I kind of go through, my wake up, walk the dog, smoothie, coffee, I sit down, typically with my laptop on my lap, poolside here in Puerto Rico, and, have about 60 to 90 minutes where I'm going through the different communities that we have, our journal communities on Facebook, our Podcasters Paradise Facebook community, answering questions and engaging with people, going on email. Email is definitely something that I'm on multiple times per day, because, maybe I'm chatting with a potential sponsor or a business partner or an affiliate or fill in the blank. So definitely when it comes to communicating to our communities and via email, I'd add a solid 90 minutes to every single day. And that's 5 days a week. So that'd be, another 5-8 hours. So I'm probably coming in around 15 hours of real work a week on the high side.
My goodness, that's incredible, because you're generating over $2 million a year in revenue. And a ridiculous amount of that, over $2 million of that is profit, right?
Yeah.
So how you have this team, you're offering Podcasters Paradise, you've got affiliate links, you've got all this stuff. How do you keep your margins so high? I mean, that's roughly a 90% profit margin, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, and that's one thing that we post on the income reports is exactly what our profit margins are, our net profit to gross income on a month-to-month basis. And we are typically above 80%. And there's been a few months we've actually even been above 90% for our net profit to gross, which again, is something that we've just worked at relentlessly for the past 10 years. I mean, there was a time 4 or 5 years ago where I had 13 people on my team and our profit margins were 40 to 50 to 60% on any given month. And at that point, we're just not running the business we want to run. So now, we've just, dropped the things that were, bringing in revenue, but not the kind that we, really justified keeping it on for what it was, taking us energy and team size wise. And we just continued to whittle everything down. And we just now have the core things that are really working for us. We have 3 full-time virtual assistants. It's myself and Kate. So there's a total of 5 of us, but myself, Kate, and then 3 virtual assistants and, an independent contractor if we need some website work, an independent contractor if we need some graphic design. And that's on a case-by-case basis. So besides that, our expenses are very low. And, based on just kind of the process of, what it means to run a podcasting company, the profit margins are really high. When I have a person pay me $3,500 to be a guest on Entrepreneurs on Fire, that's almost 100% profit, because it's not really costing me, barely anything, on a case-by-case basis. And the same thing when sponsors come, like, we signed a 2-year, 7-figure sponsorship deal with HubSpot. And, that's almost 100% profits because they are sponsoring the podcast. And so it's just kind of like what it costs to run the podcast, which at this point, because of how dialed in we've got over the years, is very reasonable.
Yeah, so those VAs would do everything from podcast editing to uploading to Libsyn or wherever you happen to
social
upload.
Media, websites, show notes pages, communicating with our guests, reminders, really everything. I mean, if I'm ever doing something for the business, I'm always asking myself, is this something only I can do? And of course, very rarely the answer is yes. So when the answer is no, which is most of the time, I find a way to outsource it to one of my VAs.
So that's a good $1 million question, literally maybe a $2 million question. What are the things at this point that you say are the things that only you can do?
Interview successful entrepreneurs.
Boom.
That's basically it.
And what does Kate, your partner, do? What does she do in the company?
So she is really kind of the glue that, holds everything together, because there's only so much you want to outsource to your virtual assistant. So when it comes to like insurance for the business, accounting, like of course we have an accountant, but you need the communication going back and forth and that all lined up. Managing that team as well. Because, you can have 3 virtual assistants and they're great because they've been with us for 12, 9, and 7 years. The 3 of them combined. So that's, been a great long term. They know their place, but, they're still managing that's involved with that as well. So, Kate also has a lot of great personal ventures of her own. Like she has 2 podcasts that she runs. She's, big into the Podcasters Paradise community. She's there every morning answering people's questions, started, creating our monthly Q&As that we have and doing all the kind of back end stuff. So she's really the glue that kind of holds everything together with the business, where I'm really just kind of showing up to be the voice and the face.
Wow. Are there any parts of that you missed or thought you were good at one point? Because this is the reason I want to ask it a different way, is this is such a challenge for a lot of leaders, because we get our fingers in all kinds of pieces of the pie and we end up capping our growth, not scaling, etc. So can you walk us through a little more of that journey? Because maybe it was easy for you, but it's hard for a lot of people, and I would include myself in that category.
Yeah, for me, it was actually easy because by nature, I'm a very lazy person. So I can work really, really hard when I know that by me working hard, there's a future JLD that gets to be really lazy. And that's kind of been the story of my life, is that I was able to work super hard for like the first few years of Entrepreneurs on Fire, like put in like 50, 60, 70-hour weeks on a, very consistent basis, because I knew there was a future JLD in Puerto Rico by the pool, being able to be very, very lazy. And that's exactly where I've gotten to. I mean, I could easily take on more tasks and work harder and make more money in this venture or that venture. But at this stage in my life, like I just don't want to. So it's always been easy for me to give up tasks because I don't like to micromanage. I really like to have essentially nothing on my plates. Like Kate and I kind of, it's like a conversation we have like every single day. It's like we're kind of having dinner and we're enjoying, a nice sunset over the Caribbean. And we just kind of like, say like, hey, so what do you have going on tomorrow? And like when she asked me that question, I love pulling open my calendar, looking at my phone, pulling up Google Calendar and literally saying, Kate, like I have nothing on my calendar. Like I have nothing on my calendar tomorrow. And whenever I say that, like I am proud to say that and I am happy to say that. Whereas I know a lot of people in this world, they're just like prideful of packing their calendar with every single thing they could possibly do. And by the way, I do that occasionally because it makes sense. Like, I'll even kind of like show you like a screenshot of my day today. As you see, it's like, boom, back to back to back. That's one day a month. One day a month I have reserved in the afternoon for a block of interviews on other shows. That's one day per month. So now I'm back to back to back. And 97% of those shows are 15 minutes long because that's the cap that I have. So that's, it's one day a month that I have blocked in the afternoon where it's packed. Then of course those four Thursdays are pretty busy from 1 to 5, 1 to 6. And then besides that, my calendar needs to be almost empty. If it's not, there might be one other day that I just jam it up full of things that, I need to take care of, like chats with sponsorships or, health coach or whatever it might be. But for me, it's like batching or nothing.
Yeah. So thank you for being generous with your time, because I thought, I bet you we're going to get 20 minutes with John Lee Dumas. I know that you work in small increments.
Whatever you're paying your assistant, it's a good dollar amount, because she was pretty adamant that this was going to be a 45 plus
probably
minute
working with
call.
Carly. She's pretty amazing. She is great. Let me ask you. You must be very good at saying no, because in addition to inbound guests, you probably have all kinds of business partners and ventures and people who want to pick your brain and all of that stuff. Have you developed a template for saying no, or deciding which inbound opportunities you're going to jump on and which ones you're just going to put up the wall and say, I like my mornings. I want to have a day with nothing on it. That is another thing that's extremely difficult for a lot of people.
For me, it's really the Derek Sivers mentality of, if it's not a heck yes, it's a no. And for me, most things are not a heck yes. So it's an easy no. I actually, most people are people pleasers, and I never have been, and I actually don't have a problem just saying no. And a lot of times that kind of shocks people and kind of takes them aback, because they're just like, well, you're saying no? I'm like, yeah, you're asking me for my time, for my energy, and I'm saying no. Is that a problem? And then they're just like, well, I guess if you put it that way, not really. So I have an easy time saying no. It's really the reason why I've built the kind of business that I have. And I get why a lot of people say yes to a lot of things. And I think there is a season and a stage in your life when you should, because you don't know what's going to come from that yes. But at some point, you've got to say, I've accomplished a lot of things. My time's becoming more valuable. My energy is becoming more valuable. I've got to jump on the no train. And something that, has really helped me over the years is, when you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to all the other things that you could possibly be doing at that time. So you're not just saying yes to one thing. You're literally saying no to countless opportunities. So when you kind of put it that way, you're like, well, I don't want to say yes to something I'm kind of mediocre about, because then I'm technically saying no to something that could come up between now and then that's unbelievably amazing. And I've actually been burned by that a few times. It's really hammered home the truth.
Yeah, I think we've all gotten to that point where we said yes in April because April was empty. And then you get another opportunity that you're like, oh, I can't do that now because I said yes to this thing that
exactly
looked good. When you say no, because this is a sort of a perennial theme on this podcast, because it's a challenge for so many leaders and for myself. It led me to burnout 17 years ago, not saying no. And I've been in recovery for 17 years since then, gotten a lot better at it. But I found the more things grow, and this podcast grows every year, the more inbound we get. And I still say no 90, 95% of the time to everything that comes in. However, it keeps seeming to increase. And of course, the quality of the offers, like something that you would have said heck yes to 10 years ago, is now probably a no. Have you found, by being so disciplined, that the amount of inbound requests have dropped, or is it a steady stream that continues to flow in? I'm just wondering if you get a reputation for just saying no all the time, whether eventually people stop asking.
No, it's still steady, because I think even if you do get that reputation, people want to be that person that breaks through, because then it's even more of a valuable yes when you get it.
Yeah.
And so they just keep coming in, and, I just happily, keep saying no in a very, kind and respectful way. And, then there may be a time when I go back to those individuals, if I'm releasing a book, a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago now, I published my first traditionally published book. And so I went to a lot of people that I said no to over the years and said, hey, listen, I totally understand if you're a no now, and that's totally your prerogative, but I'm going into major promotion mode. I've opened my entire January, February, March. If you want to just book any time that works for you, my entire calendar is open. Let's do this. And I did 372 interviews over the course of 3 months. Like it was mayhem. I did nothing but, and it was a very intense time, but enjoyable at the same time. I mean, man, I woke up and, in the middle of the night, like just repeating, my little spiel that I had going on there. And it was a fun time, but no. So and really to answer your question, they keep on coming, and it really goes back to 2012 when my mentor and my mastermind coach both said, John, like you're never going to find enough guests to be on Entrepreneurs on Fire. They just don't exist. Like they were so wrong. I mean, every day, I'm getting more people requesting to be on the show than I could have on in the entire month, because just the world that we live in. And that's an awesome world to be a part of.
That's incredible. I want to talk about your book, which is great, by the way. It's called The Common Path to Uncommon Success. And it's everything you have taught over the years, which is great.
And
have learned, put together in a couple hundred pages. Why did you go major publisher on this? Why did you not just self-publish? Because I noticed on your income report, just to finish the question, you've actually got revenue coming back. So you either sold a ton of copies or you had a low advance, or I want to know, because you're very transparent with this stuff, the details of the book deal, why a major publisher, how that became profitable for you, etc.
So I did the self-publishing route 3 times prior. I launched the Freedom Journal in 2016, the Mastery Journal in 2017, and the Podcast Journal in 2019. And the Freedom Journal did $453,000 in 33 days. The Mastery Journal did $280,000 in 33 days. And the Podcast Journal, we did not do a Kickstarter campaign. We just sold it. It's actually now sold out. Like it just completely sold out. It's gone. And we're not doing a reprinting, which could be another conversation if we want to have it. But anyways,
sure.
I decided I just wanted to try something different. And I wasn't committed to going the traditional route. But I got an agent, and she was able to get together all the big publishers, and they started a bidding war. And I kind of was enjoying the bidding war, seeing that that advance go up, and up. And even then, I wasn't committed to doing that route, but I was just still kind of like just seeing where we got to. And then finally, HarperCollins came at us with a $350,000 advance, with $80,000 in promised marketing on top of that. So essentially like a $430,000 kind of package. And I said, I know I could sell a lot of copies going the self-publishing route, but to get essentially almost $500,000 guaranteed up front, because of course this was actually even before I wrote the book. This will be good. And it'll be interesting to work with a traditional publisher to see what they bring to the table, editing wise and marketing wise and everything else, getting it into, traditional bookstores like Barnes and Noble and, fill in the blank. So those are like all the reasons why I went with a traditional publisher. Ended up not being something that I would do again. You can, read between the lines or ask me direct questions because I'm happy to talk about it. I think HarperCollins is wonderful. They have amazing human beings that work there, but I mean, it was not an experience that added, to the book. It was something that, looking back at it, I would likely go the self-publishing route and just.
Can you tell me why? Because I'm right at that point. This is like the podcaster asking questions for himself personally. I had a 2-book deal with Penguin Random House. Again, great editors, love the editing process. They did their best, but I'm seriously thinking about self-publishing next time. And I'm curious, pros and cons. Why would you not go traditional publishing in the future?
Really, the only pro is if you get a huge advance. To me, that's really the only pro, to just have money in the pocket. Everything else, you can just go a self-publishing route and just have more control over everything. Like I was thinking maybe the editor is going to bring like a lot of value to the book. Like in my case, that didn't happen. Maybe the marketing team's going to have these really cool ideas. That didn't happen. They actually ended up giving me what ended up being bad advice on certain areas. So I would just say, hey, if you've got an audience, you know what you're doing, like take control of the process and just make it happen.
Yeah. Have you done, I'm sure you have done the math versus the number of copies you sold and how much you made through a traditional versus how much you would have made if you sold that many copies.
I actually have not done the math.
Oh, you have not?
I don't think it'd be that difficult to do the math for obvious reasons, but I was just like, you know what? There's no need to rub my face in it either way. I mean, I'm happy. I'm happy with the dollars that the book has brought in. And for me, the bigger picture for the book, and this is true, is, for years I have people come to me and they're just like, John, I would just love for you to answer this question that I have. And of course, I ask this question. It's a very personal question. And for me, it's just like, I'm either going to spend like an hour plus with this individual, which I can't do because of all the questions that I get. Or I just have to tell them, I can't answer your question because it's just too much time, energy, and bandwidth for one person when, I'm getting tens, if not hundreds of these questions on a monthly basis. Now to every single person, I can just respond back. The answer is here. The common path to uncommon success. Take it, read it, and prosper.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I was getting so many questions, so much inbound. And now I have, I think, 8 courses as of this month. And I've got several books and a lot of the answers are in there. And it's just so easy. And if someone's self-motivated, they can find it in there. And then if they want to have a really meaningful discussion after, talk about was it the podcasting journal? You said we can come back to it, that you stopped producing it. What's the backstory there?
Yeah, there's really no backstory beyond the fact that, we did a run of 10,000 and it just sold out fairly quickly. And Kate and I just kind of have decided that we're just kind of getting out of the physical product game. One of the reasons we're in Puerto Rico and none of that income can be actually considered under the Puerto Rico Tax Act, which is a whole other conversation. So, we're actually, paying pretty hefty taxes on that, not to mention like storage and shipping. And there's just a lot that's involved with physical products. So, we're letting the Freedom Journal, the Mastery Journal slowly sell out as well. And, in a few years, we'll be out of the physical product game. And probably at about that time, we'll have some other brilliant idea for a physical product and jump right back in it.
Okay, couple quick questions before we wrap up. Starting in 2012, 2013, I've had this conversation with Brian Clark here on Copy Blogger. I'm sure you know Brian. And anyway, we all got started around the same time. If you were starting out today, what do you tell, what has changed and what is the same?
Well, I'll start with what's the same. The same is the people that win at a high level create the number one solution to a real problem. If you create the number one solution to a real problem, you win. What's changed? You've got to be more niche now. Like in 2012, you could launch a podcast interviewing entrepreneurs and succeed, which I did. Entrepreneurs on Fire launched in 2022, 2023, 2024. That does not win. It's too vague. It's too broad. There's too much saturation. You need to niche your flipping face off. That's where you win.
Okay, so if you were launching today, what would it be? Entrepreneurs of 6-figure businesses, entrepreneurs in a particular field? Would it be something different? Any idea on what you would do?
It would probably be something in the health space, just because that's where my passions are really aligned right now. And it would be on one really pain point topic. And that could be something like a podcast that's only focused on sleep, just on sleep, or only focused on, male fertility. It would be something that's really, really, niched, and it would just become the best podcast on that topic.
One of the great fears, of course, from people is that if they niche down that much, they're going to miss 99.999% of the population. And
as Seth Godin says, 99.99% will never care anyway. So you're going after people who you're never going to get anyways.
Right. Any other tips for entrepreneurs or people who want to start a side hustle about starting today?
Honestly, let's just keep it simple with the theme that if you're able to identify and create the number one solution to a real problem, you will win.
That's great. Okay. Tell us where people can find you and what you're doing online these days.
Well, all the magic happens at eofire.com. A lot of free courses for entrepreneurs there, a great newsletter. Check out the podcast, Entrepreneurs on Fire, at any podcast listening app that you so desire. And it's been great chatting with you, Carey.
It's been great chatting with you too, John. Thank you so much.
Adios.
Adios.
There's a new movement happening in the country to reclaim the promise of Jesus' unconditional love and grace, and to see his church rise above the culture war. He Gets Us hopes to give it a voice. The biggest faith campaign in history, He Gets Us invites a rapidly growing audience, from spiritual explorers to like-minded Christians, to reconsider the radical life of Jesus. Whether people believe Jesus was God or just a man, they're invited to consider his example for themselves.